Do you want to know how to connect multiple highlines together to create big highlines? Let's explore all the different ways you can do that on this episode of How Not to Highline. Hi, I'm Ryan Jinks and welcome to my dining room. We set up this demonstration to discuss all the different ways people have recently talked about on Slack chat of how to connect backups to mains and how to connect two mains together to create big highlines that are safer than if they were just one continuous piece. How we set this up is we finally found a good use for this wine cabinet by natural anchoring it. And of course, you want to always pad your anchor with a bottle of vodka. And now I have a reason to explain to my mother why I have this pole in my living room. And we tensioned it with a bungee cord. Now this topic is important because we rigged a 960 foot, I don't know how many meters that is. What's the meter ratio? This last fall, we rigged 290 meter highline in Yosemite. And it was one continuous piece for the main and one continuous piece for the backup. And I felt pretty uncomfortable the whole time doing that because if the main were to break, you're gonna take quite a fall onto the backup. Now let's say you don't break your back, which we have absolutely no idea whether or not you would. It really depends on what your backup is. But the other big problem is if you have to rescue somebody. Now you have this big, deep V that you gotta slide down to get to the person and pull them back up. We want to mitigate that, especially when the lines get longer and longer, because I have some 5 and 7 and 800 meter projects for this year, and it's clearly not practical to have one single continuous piece. Also because I don't wanna buy one continuous single piece, because that's not only one expensive single purchase, but then I'm never going to use that piece again because I don't want to carry a kilometer long webbing everywhere I go. So some of the things we're going to discuss in this video are T-loops. I'm not going to say what this is yet, so you have to wait till the end of the video to find out. The Y2K method and the dog bone method. And we're going to go over the pros and cons of each one. Now before we get started, let's talk about the criteria in which we will analyze all of our options. First and foremost, we must have a safe and redundant setup. Our second criteria is modular or standardized. Can everyone just have the same thing regardless of what brand you have and still make it work? Our third criteria is efficiency. How hard is it to rig and how much money does it cost to do that one connection? And our last criteria, of course, is whether or not the ring can go over whatever you've set up. First, we're going to discuss Slacktivity's Y2K method. This is not Y2K webbing. It's a very specific webbing and a specific system for it. It's designed for anything longer than 200 meters because it's low stretch, high tech webbing. What they do is they connect here with a square quick link, or in this case I have an 8mm quick link, and then a little bit further back they have two loops facing each other, and the backup is also connected independently. This is connected independently, so that's redundant. But in order to have the backup connected to the main, it is attached with these loops. Now, that is safe and redundant. I like that part. However, it doesn't seem to be very modular or standardized. You have to buy the bundle, more or less, because you need to have 54 meter long backups, and you need 50 meter long mains. Now what I like about that is I like the idea of having 50 meter sections. Those are small-ish sections that you can just add until you have the length you need, rather than you have a 300 meter piece of webbing, but you're only gonna do a 120 meter highline. Now from an efficiency standpoint, it is pretty easy to set up. This only requires 2 quick links. However, the cost factor is an issue. It is only on the Y2K webbing, and that ends up being 400 euros for the bundle, the main and the backup, for only 50 meters, and that's 450 US dollars. That's quite a bit. That's about $1.20 per foot or $3.80 per meter, and that can get expensive when it's designed for really long highlines, which makes them really expensive highlines. The other thing is if I wanted to replicate this at home on my webbing, I would have to find a place that can sew through 3 layers of webbing because this loop requires 3 layers right here. Whereas the local guy that I have at the local parachute jump center can sew through 2 layers safely and easily, but he can't go through 3. So I'm very limited being able to do this, and the backups are required to be longer in order for this to work. This setup requires 6 sew-in loops, but if you have sew-in loops on the ends of your webbing, it requires 2 additional sew-in loops and requires 2 quick links, or technically you could use soft shackles in these spots. Another downside I'm not too fond of is having 4 loops in the same quick link, especially a square quick link. And lastly, can you get a ring over it? The bomber ring, Slack Inov's Vortex, if you jiggle it, it can go over. Just about every solution we do, you basically have to have tape. If you were to tape that together, the rings would slide over quite easily. So the next option we're going to look at is Slacktivity's T-loops. These are death loops, and these are T-loops. And a couple benefits of T-loops is you don't have to tape as often if you just run the webbing through that, and then the ring slides over pretty well. The problem is you end up having to have quite a few of these, like every 16 meters. These options come on their pink tube and their red tube. Now, it's interesting because their sew-in loop on pink tube is 19 kilonewtons, and a seahorse is 23.5 kilonewtons, but their T-loops are less than half of that at 11.5 kilonewtons. These aren't that strong. So I don't feel like they're safe. Like they're safe. I just like, if we're looking for safe, right here you have the end sew-in loops attached to the T-loop, and you can use square quick link, soft shackle, or a oval quick link. However, and that works. If it's pulled in either direction, it'll hold, but it's only 11 kilonewtons, and then it has this wiggle room, and if the backup wants to move, if you tape this out of the way, and your tape could break, and it's much, much better if this is taped out of the way. The other thing I've heard of people doing, I don't quite fully understand this, if they want to back it up more often, is they would tie a knot, frost knot. I think tying knots in your backup webbing is okay, but in the middle, really? So let's say you do a frost knot, because I really can't recommend any other knot. Like an overhand knot, if you think 11.5 kilonewtons is bad, tie an overhand knot in your webbing. And then you attach it to, not the death loop, but that's what fits right now. That just doesn't seem like the ring is going to go over that very well. And you can tape the crap out of it, and it might, but it's not that strong, and it's really, really bulky. I'm not for knots in the middle of a high line. On your backup line, a padded frost knot on the anchor, that's fine. I can root for that all day long. Let's talk about efficient. T-loops do come on the pink tube and red tube from Slacktivity, but they don't come on anybody else's. You can pretty much add it. It only does require sewing through 2 layers, but it requires sewing right here and right here. If you do this, this is like the worst thing for stitching, is to be pulling against the stitching. Or like your backup, if your backup is connected like this, you probably won't die, but it's not going to hold anything. That's how screamers are built. When you pull against the stitching, it absorbs some of your fall, but it's intended to break. So never do a T-loop like this. Make sure that the spine of it has stitching on it as well. Sometimes you goof up and you might put it in the quick link wrong, and one side's facing up the wrong way. So now you're walking on top of a bunch of T-loops, and that's not ideal. But if you do have a 300 meter piece and you are trying to keep it 300 meters long, and you want to have some way to connect your backup to your main, T-loops can work. They're not super strong, and you can technically have them done at any place that can sew a safe bar tack. So let's discuss Slacktivity's third option, which is sew-in backups to the main. So when the backup is sewn to the main line, it's very safe and very redundant, because the webbings are continuous pieces, and if the stitching were to break, worst case scenario, the next stitching will catch you. It'll almost act like a shock absorber if it even did break, but it's going to be plenty strong at all these connections. However, it doesn't feel very standard or modular because you can buy this with pink tube from Slacktivity where they have the exact length that's perfect. However, sometimes, especially with nylon webbing, when it gets hot or cold or wet or dry, it really changes the elasticity of the webbing. So the main could either bottom out or you have too big of loops, and there's no adjustability in that. Plus, not everybody's going to have the ability to sew their backup to their main. A lot of people don't have access to sewing machines, and they won't know if they're safe enough. People are constantly messaging me about, is my sewing loop safe? And they send me pictures and samples to break test. And if you're not buying pink tube, this requires quite a bit of knowledge to be able to safely put this together. And that doesn't explain on what you would want to do for big high lines unless you bought a big piece and sewed it all together. At some point, we do need connections and we do need a solution for that. As far as efficiency and rigging goes, it cannot get more efficient. However, it costs quite a bit to sew a loop. Now, you can get them done from anywhere from $2 to $5 to $20 depending on where you're getting. But if you have one of these every 20 meters, are you trying to replace the tapes? Or are you just trying to do it for safety? If you have it every 50 meters, how much money is that going to cost you if you have this often? So now let's discuss Arnaud Capitant's method 1 that he shared on Slack chat. Sorry if I said your name wrong. The secondary loop that comes on Balance Community's loops, and I believe Slacktivity offers those as well, are in conjunction with the backup. Now, what I like about this is that is pretty redundant. The backup is connected directly, the main is connected directly, and this is pretty dang safe. So, it is safe and redundant. I like it. You can swap this out for a soft shackle, or you can switch these two carabiners since there's 4 webbings in here, which I don't like having 4 loops in one thing like this. But if it's taped, it may not be so bad. As far as efficiency and modular, this can work because you can buy these straight from the source. You don't have to do any fancy stuff at home. This also doesn't require too much more money because this doesn't cost an enormous amount to have these loops when you buy your webbing, and then it only requires 2 quick links. However, I can't do this at home because this requires 3 layers of sewing right here to add this loop if I don't already have it on my webbing when I purchase it. So I can't just do this in my situation here in Lodi, California. As far as usability goes, I don't see too much of a problem with it if you can just offset that and tape this. Now, if this loop was a little bit bigger, there we set it really nicely like that, I think a ring would slide over quite nicely on this right there. Having the 4 loops all sharing this quick link can create the problem, but that's not too bad. Arnaud Capitant's second method is like this. Sew and loop on the backup is connected to one side of the secondary loop, and same as over here. This is a 10mm quick link for reference, and this is 8mm right here. I don't like this because now it requires 3 quick links. You have quite a bit going on here to cross these. It doesn't sit very well. And the other thing is these backups are not connected. So I don't feel like this is super safe, even though a lot of things have to go wrong for you to die. I like to have the backups connected and the main connected and then have them be interconnected somehow. This is very dependent on these things. And these are technically not supposed to be loaded except in emergency situations. So if this broke in here and then it's putting a lot of strain in here, I don't feel like it's super safe, and I don't feel like it's very easy to get a leash ring over all of that, and it costs more money having to have more quick links. And here is an impractical third method that I'm just showing as an example. This is safe and bomber. This is safe and bomber. And then this kind of makes it redundant. Not too many loops in one quick link, but clearly this is a problem. That's 4 quick links. That's a clusterfuck. It's awful in so many ways. And then this is most likely to get loaded first. So do you put the main loop, the one that's supposed to be, on the backup loop, and are you crisscrossing? This is what I want in safety and redundancy, but this is clearly not how we're gonna get it. So now let's discuss Fer Kpok's, I'm so sorry if I said that wrong too, from New Zealand. His, I like to call this the T-loop on steroids. It's the same idea as the death T-loop, but what makes it strong is you have this additional piece sewn inside in order to make it so it can be pulled this way and it can be pulled this way, because this stitching here is what gets to see the force when it's being pulled this direction. This can be in conjunction with a loop right here if this was the end of the webbing, or this could be in the middle of a line if you're trying to do 100-meter mains and have this at the 50-meter mark. This works. However, as far as modular and everyone can have it standard, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sewings, 7, 8 if you count these, and then it doesn't even count the ends of this. That's a lot of things to be sewn. It requires 2 quick links plus like a quick link right here if this was the end of the main. As far as usability goes, taping that off is no problem. A ring would slide over it really well. So, and this can create, this is only 2 layers, 2 layers, 2 layers. So it's not too hard if I wanted to create this myself. It's just there's a lot of work that goes into this. So I'm not super fond of this being a standard that everyone has on their webbing, because not everybody has access to a sewing machine to get all fancy. And what we have here is Arthur Lefebvre, sorry if I said that wrong, is the dog bone method, where it goes up, it's stitched, and it comes back down. And the thing is, this I don't feel is neither safe nor redundant, because the backups are not connected to each other. And if it breaks right here in the middle, which it usually breaks the first stitch, it could be this first stitch or this one, but if it breaks here, basically everything comes apart and you die. The other problem is it's 3 layers of sewing, and no company is going to do this, so you have to do this after you buy your webbing, and that's not as modular and standard as I would like it to be. Now before we move on, let's discuss soft shackles on sewn loops. Now rope on rope is bad, but that's when ropes are rubbing over each other. For example, you do tie your leash to your harness, and that is technically a rope on rope situation, but because ropes are not moving on each other, they're not oscillating, they don't rub through each other. But if you have a rope rubbing and running over this, so let's say you set this up as a rappel and your rope ran over it, you would burn through this before you finished your rappel and you would die. So you just have to understand when rope on rope is bad. Now, a soft shackle is 3 times cheaper if you make them yourself, 3 times lighter, and 3 times stronger than a square quick link, an 8mm here. So I advocate for using soft shackles because I love them and they're lightweight and they're bomber. This will never come off the head in a situation where this is constantly tight. If you are worried about that, and I would, in the middle of a highline, I would always tape it so it can never jiggle loose. But even if this was a backup and this was jiggling all the time, that I still don't think it would come apart, especially if you tape it. There are ways to splice and dice and put ropes and little strings around that to make this locked. Or if you do the locking method, you go under itself and then over its head, and that is not going to come off, like ever, especially taped. And if you invert it, then the knot sits inside of the circle it creates, keeping the knot out of the way. In this situation, you could put the knot inside the loop so the rings would slide over nicely. This is pretty minimal, pretty light, and pretty cheap, and pretty strong. If you look at my soft shackle here, this thing is at least 5 years old. I've never padded it. I've used it on Sewn loops the entire time, and sometimes on soft releases. Don't troll me, I'll make another video about that. And it just has almost no abrasion. It just has lost some of its color from the UV light that takes away the dye out of the Dyneema pretty quickly. And this method is how I have highlined 2 or 3 times now and found it to be pretty decent for ring usage. I felt safe. I did tape the crap out of it before I used it, but nothing is really moving on each other and it'll never cut through. Dyneema has a coefficient of 0.04. That is the same friction level as Teflon. It's pretty hard to rub Teflon and Teflon to get it to rub through each other. Now that we discussed this as a foundation, we can show you the next methods that I'm pretty excited about. So my ideal situation is that we would have 50-meter pieces for everything and a single sew-in loop on the ends. I find that to be the cheapest, the simplest. Pretty much every slackline company offers that, or you can actually get that done on your own. You have more options for your loops. Getting a sew-in loop done is not that hard. All the other methods require a lot of stitching. So here we have 4 loops. This would be on the ends of our webbing, but the backup and the main would have to come together. We'll talk about how to extend the backup in just a moment. One option I was discussing in a previous video is if I put a square quick link right here and put all 4 loops in that square quick link and backed it up, because that's not redundant, obviously. Back it up with a semi-loose soft shackle that's taped, stitched, or locked tight. And then that button knot would sit inside of the square quick link, and it's technically redundant. I didn't like some of it. I don't like everything in one component. This is how I've done it in the past, where I've had the backup and the main, but they were independent. And this is a very simple solution, whether this be quick links or soft shackles. It's just this is connected and this is connected. So now let's discuss the different ways you can interlink these. If you wanted to use a quick link, you could technically have a quick link in there, and in case something were to blow, of course you'd close your quick link, it would yard on this. This would be fine. As long as the quick link didn't get cross-loaded or anything, technically that works. So if everything's on a Highline and this is jiggling and this is tight and this would be all taped together nicely, so that would sit like this, a ring would pass over that. So if you had a mainline failure, let's see here, that crosses that way, this would hold. This could pull on something weird. You might want to put 2 on there, and maybe on this side and 1 on this side, and then you have redundancy in how they're connected. But that's 1, 2, 3 connections, possibly 4. I'm trying to do simpler. Now something that's less likely to get cross-loaded is another soft shackle. And you could hide the button knot inside of there, and you could stack, and you actually stack that pretty well. A lot of flexibility in it. And everything could either be locked, stitched, or taped, and yeah, I think that would be really fine. If there was a failure, this would hold in either direction, it seems like. I was kind of wanting a little bit more redundancy, and so I'd put a second one in there, but then that turns into a huge cluster. That takes 4 soft shackles. You got 4 button knots to pass that are all fairly close to each other. This becomes quite a mess to have this interconnected. So now for my new favorite method. Florent Berthet from Slack Inov messaged me and showed me the Slack Inov Split that he came up with. And I'm pretty excited about it, and I think I'm going to start using this way. So instead of putting the soft shackle on there like normal, you create an X, like an 8 shape, figure 8. And instead of, so you cross it right there, then you go through your sew-in loop and put it on like normal. I don't find a locking method is ideal for this, but if I put that head inside of the loop, it gets rid of my button knot problem of passing the knot. and then you have this 8 shape. And then the quick link goes over the X that it creates in the center. And then you just have your 2 loops in there. Now this is an 8mm quick link. It's a lot going on inside of there, but it's not big enough to be like moving around a lot. So you would just tape this just like that. That button knot stays there, and that's not too hard to pass a ring over. You can use a 10mm quick link, which would fit in there quite a bit easier, but you're not going to be adjusting it a lot once it's installed. This all gets taped, and you just basically leave it. The downside to tape is that you can't really inspect it. You can feel around and see if anything shifted, but you're basically covering up everything you're trying to see during an inspection. So a variation on the Slack Inov Split is to put a quick link in there. Soft shackles on soft shackles rubbing against each other, it's not a problem. You're probably gonna get more damage having stainless steel rubbing against this. Things won't be rubbing. They'll be taped or Velcroed and secured. With that button knot, you can tuck that button knot right there and it'll sit quite nicely. You can adjust that and tape the crap out of it. Now, as far as this being pulled, these are not sharing any other quick links, so you only have 2 loops in here. If things were to pull apart, this is solid. This backup is connected, the main is connected, and they're connected to each other. I really, really like how all of this is interconnected. And then you could tape that pretty easily and tape this. So what happens if these are all 50-meter pieces? You don't get to have loops in your backup if it's the same length as your main. So that brings us to extenders. One webbing extender idea is to have small pieces of webbing with sewn loops on the ends that you would connect to the backup loop. So all this action would be going on here at the Inov Split, and then about 4 meters, 3 meters, 5 meters over, whatever you find is perfect for your webbing combination, it would just be connected over here. And that wouldn't be too hard to pass over, or you could soft shackle that and then tape it, and it would be pretty bomber. However, Slack Inov's way of doing it is to get a 6mm spliced eye Dyneema extender. And this is simple, smooth. This is about 7,000 pounds of force. Sorry, I can't think of the kilonewtons off the top of my head. And it's going to be pretty much stronger than any webbing that you have. And you can make these at home at the length you want. Whereas the webbing extenders, you'd have to get them sewn and you'd have to be getting specific lengths. This is pretty self-explanatory that the eye goes on here, but girth hitched on here is a nice option instead of using a quick link because it's a lot easier to slide over. It eliminates one connector that could fail. We will slack snap the shit out of this to make sure it's safe, but this is fine in my opinion right now. So let me run through from beginning to end how to do the Slack Inov Split. So I take this through here, I cross over inside of itself, kind of like you're going to do a locked soft shackle, because it's the same concept, except we're going to put the sewn loop right here. So you put the loop through there, the soft shackle. If you ever work with soft shackles enough, you won't be too concerned that they're going to open. Put the knot right there, and then I'm going to put that facing down, and we're going to put the loop here because let's say the web lock is that way, and so I'll have adjustability with that, or I'll have an extender on that side of the end of this 50 meter. You only need to extend one side. Now you don't want to girth hitch like this because that can reduce the strength, and you can see how that strangles that. What you want to do is you want to put the loop through the eye and then take the tail and go like that and roll that over, and that's going to grab the webbing nicer and not pinch that Dyneema so much. This eye is connected here. Tighten that up. That'll get all taped up. check everything. This will be on that side. And this is done. And then you would just tape the crap out of that. I would probably tape here, here, and then tape. What you'd want to do is you'd want to tape this soft shackle, the throat right there, tape that throat, and then put them where they go, and then tape the whole thing after that. And that is only 2 parts. This is something you can get at home for only a few dollars and make pretty simple. Make sure you stitch this or do a brummeled lock. Slack Inov sells these in 3 and 5 meters, I believe, in length. In case you want to buy their method, they have soft shackles for this. This has a 7-inch inside diameter on my red one here. 5 or 6 inches would be better. This is a 4-inch diameter soft shackle. So the inside space right here is 4 inches, which is too small to do this. So I'd say about 6 inches would be the perfect length of your soft shackle. And if you want some flexibility in your extensions, what you do is you put it halfway through like this and then connect it to your soft shackle. And so they sell these in 3 and 5 meter lengths, and that gives you options in order to fold it in half or do the girth hitched method that I just showed you. So there are many ways to connect multiple lines together for long high lines. But I have a dream that all slackline companies and slackliners would all get together and get along and work together to make 50-meter long sections with single sewn loops on the end. And we can all just standardize things and agree on extenders that we can use. And you can use either metal, quick link. You have to use a soft shackle for the Slack Inov Split, but you can use a metal quick link in there if you want some variety for redundancy. However, this is amazing. It's light. It only takes 2 soft shackles. Either way, you need an extender without having to have very specific pieces where you have a 50, 55 meter, 50, 55 meter, 50, in order to have the, everything's the same. I'm gonna cut all of my webbing in my garage. I'm only going to buy 50 meters from now on with a single loop. And if I highline a 60 meter highline, yes, I will have a split in it. However, when I do a 350 meter line, I don't have to take a 700 meter long single piece of webbing. I can take exactly what I need for a trip down to 50 meters of what I need. And when we go on big hikes in Yosemite and some projects that we've got coming up on traveling's a lot easier with several 50-meter sections versus a kilometer of webbing. Another reason I'm really advocating for smaller pieces is I've heard 2 times that a team of people carrying a single long piece of webbing were walking in a hiking train where they're all interconnected, so the webbing comes out of one bag and goes into the next person's bag, and they're all doing these sketchy hikes. And what's more dangerous than free soloing? Free soloing while attached to another person free soloing. So what's nice about smaller sections is you can do this in the field. If you connected, let's say 3 50-meter sections and that goes in one person's bag, and 2 50-meter sections and that goes in another person's bag, makes hiking easier, and you just connect this on the spot when you arrive to your highline. You would just connect the top webbing to the bottom webbing of the next bag, connect that in there, label which side's top and bottom, you get that perfect, and then when it comes out of this bag and runs out, the next bag goes out and is perfectly flaked when you show up. So thank you, Florent Berthet and Slack Inov, for sharing this amazing method that I can now feel comfortable turning all my pieces into 50 meters, and we're gonna have future videos on us testing this in the park to see how it feels and what it feels like to connect on site. We're going to do a bunch of break tests on splices on soft shackles and girth hitches versus quick links. We're going to break a ton of quick links. So make sure you subscribe, like, and follow to see all the future videos and follow-ups to this, and comment below, please, on pros and cons of this or another method you may come up with using the same criteria we were using, or if I'm missing criteria that could be important. And I will add those in the follow-up videos. This could be a 5 or 6 video series as I take my journey through connecting multiple lines with the Slack Inov Split. And thank you, Cam Peters, for filming this whole time and doing a lot of the setups for me while I was checking the edits. And because Cam and I are just 2 guys in a kitchen that we took an extra effort to clean up and rigged a really short slack line on a vodka bottle, a wine cabinet, and a stripper pole to show you and demonstrate something that's actually not been tested. Therefore, you shouldn't highline.